Hey, it's Jordan with TYT Network. I'm here on the east side of Providence, Rhode Island. It's primary day in the morning. Right now I'm at a polling place. It's pretty smooth, the traffic getting in and out. About 15 minutes to vote from what I hear. I am with a state representative. His name is Aaron Regunberg. He represents around this area, and he's one of the younger state representatives, and he's actually one of the rare local officials here that's come out for Senator Sanders. I wanted to talk about 2 out of 3 polling places being closed here. It seems kind of crazy to me after seeing widespread voting issues elsewhere that 66% of polling places will be closed, particularly when Rhode Island, for the first time in a while, is kind of in the mix and relevant. What do you think about the poll closures here?
Right. I mean, there's a huge amount of excitement and interest. I think we're going to have quite high turnout, and so to consolidate so many polling locations, I don't understand the logic of it. I don't know what the Board of Education's thought process was, and I was also very concerned about the process of alerting voters that their polling location is shifted. I wasn't totally confident that there was enough effort made to make sure folks were going to the right place. Having said that, from what I've heard a few reports that some places there were long lines, that some places were a bit of a mess, but I haven't heard any disaster stories. Things at this place where I voted today seemed pretty smooth.
I'm a little more cynical. Maybe it's because I'm a journalist, but I find it very hard to believe that a state that the governor is very out and open about backing Secretary Clinton, Bernie Sanders was kind of closing in some of the polls nationwide, winning more states. The government's line has been, oh, well, we're just moving it back to 2008 levels. But obviously it's a different world since 2008 in terms of voting. Do you think anything was done, kind of for preferential treatment of her?
My general analysis points more towards sort of incompetence than nefariousness, and part of that is I'm not convinced of the sort of electoral analysis that having fewer polling locations necessarily advantages Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. I wouldn't know either way, but I don't know about that leap completely, and certainly Rhode Island were not a stranger to incompetence.
Right.
I do want to stress, I think this decision was made, as far as I know, by the Board of Elections. I think the Secretary of State's gotten a lot of heat for it, but I'm not. From what I understand, it's not necessarily the Secretary of State's office that made these decisions.
What is it as a young representative? You've been in the state assembly here for 2 years, kind of coming out for Bernie Sanders, and what's the response you get from some of the elder statesmen here?
Well, I've very enthusiastically supported and endorsed Bernie Sanders. Been doing my best to get out the vote for him, and I think a lot's been made of the huge support for Bernie among my generation and among young people, and particularly in the State House, but I think across the board, a lot of that analysis has been incredibly condescending. You hear these kids, they don't understand how the real world works. When they get older, maybe they'll understand how pie in the sky and unrealistic this Bernie guy is. And I find that incredibly offensive. As I see it, my generation, the generations that come after mine, we might be the most realistic. We're the generation that has grown up under the crushing knowledge that our lives are going to be shaped by climate catastrophe. We're the generation that graduated into an economy with fewer jobs and greater serfdom to our student loans. We're the graduation that even under our first African-American president saw that our black and brown brothers and sisters continue to be disproportionately incarcerated, continue to be gunned down in the street with their hands up. And we're also the generation that has seen too often, and I say this sadly as an elected Democrat, but has seen our party either either give in too easily or sometimes join Republicans in supporting a lot of that toxic agenda. So to me, it's not naivety that has our generation thinking we need structural reform, we need big change. It's a pretty pragmatic and realistic analysis of what is needed if we're going to repair this country that we love so much, this planet that we count on for survival.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I've said to people, if you look at the last 30, 40 years at the income inequality chart that Bernie has pretty much made the central core of his campaign, what is pragmatism and incremental change gotten us? Democratic presidents, Republican presidents, it's gotten us stagnant wages and a funneling of money to the very few.
And on that issue, when you think about the issue of climate change, there's a number of issues where really our only option is big change. And so for me, this election is really about which candidate is best able not only to articulate that bold vision, but also to actually mobilize to change the narrative, to transform the political reality in front of us. I think throughout our history, big changes only happened when folks were willing to have the courage to aim high and try to transform that political reality. Whether we go back to, in the 19th century, the abolitionists who were willing to say, no, we're not going to accept this evil system of slavery, and eventually won. Whether you go to the 20th century, the civil rights movement, who, were always cautioned not to upset the apple cart too much. They thank God, didn't take that advice, and they built a movement and they won. When you go to today, you look at, a few years ago, the fight for 15 was laughed off. It was ridiculous. That's never going to happen. Today, we have cities and states across the country actually passing a $15 minimum wage because folks are willing to aim high, to see beyond our current political reality and fight for something bigger. And I've seen Bernie really, inspire so many of my generation to think like that, to think bigger. That's going to have an impact beyond this election. Beyond
just the primary here today. What Bernie keeps saying, I'm just the candidate, but the revolution is much more than me. You're young, you're 26. What do you think in terms of how this movement that Bernie has created can continue, whether he wins or not?
Well, so my background is in community organizing, so I'm a big believer in the need to build movements that can put massive pressure on the system, the need to have grassroots organizing and communities coming together to push from the outside. But I'm also, obviously, as an elected official, I'm a big believer that electoral politics matters, that who is at the table making these decisions makes a big impact. And so I think that the real value, I think there's a lot of values in Bernie's candidacy in this campaign. I think if Hillary Clinton becomes the nominee and the president, she will be a better president and a more accountable president because of this process. But I don't think that that's the most important thing that's happened in this election. There's polling out that shows that Bernie is not just moving our party to the left, which is something that desperately needs to happen. He's moving a generation to the left. Millennials have markedly different views on a lot of issues, on capitalism, on healthcare. The list goes on, because of how much he's elevated this perspective. And I think that does a lot of things. One, it lets politicians currently in office understand, wow, we don't need to be as terrified and timid as we are right now of seeming too liberal. There's miles of room on the left where we can be totally safe. In primaries, in generals, etc. But I also think it already is inspiring a new generation of folks to get involved. And my hope and dream is to run for office themselves. Certainly in Rhode Island, we need new blood, fresh faces that are actually going to represent our generation, going to represent working families. And I think that the right has been incredibly good at this. They have some structural advantages because they've got a lot more money. But they have built a movement that's moved their party to the right, that has not been afraid to challenge the establishment, to sort of bring their vision into government. We need to get better at that on the progressive side. on the side that's actually fighting for people of color, for LGBT individuals, for working families, for immigrants.
This election, the mainstream media has already, declared Bernie dead. So regardless, whether he wins, whether he loses, obviously he has a huge youth movement behind him, but a lot of young people, a lot of people just in general can get deflated if this symbol of, what they believe doesn't get elected. How do we avoid, that kind of deflation if he doesn't get into office?
I think that's really on us, on the progressive movement. I think Bernie will have a big role in that, and my guess is that he's very interested in making sure that what he's built continues to be a force. But I think the progressive movement, all the local organizations that care about these issues, we need to be out signing people up. We need to be keeping people engaged. The organizations that have been getting involved, from Working Families Party, Move On, etc. I think that there's going to be a very strategic plan for what to do with this list, this incredible list of folks who have been energized. I can't speak to too much this national movement, but I know in Rhode Island there's something that's been woken up, and I'm going to be working very hard to make sure that we can harness it and keep it going.
Do you think in terms of this issue that's come up in this election, the revolving door between corporate America, lobbyists, banks, politicians, I'd add in the media, whether Bernie wins, loses, that there's going to be more pressure to do things like overturn Citizens United, to do things like campaign finance reform, to do things like, lessen the influence of lobbyists, with a, more, quote, pragmatic president? Or does this movement need to keep the pressure on those factions?
Certainly this movement needs to keep the pressure on. I think unless you have sort of an outstanding person who's proven through their life what their core values are, like Bernie Sanders, most politicians, need that pressure on them to do the right thing, because the pressures on the other side in our system are so enormous. I'm hopeful that this process through this election, in combination with the good work that people like Senator Warren and Senator Brown have been doing to spotlight it in the media as well as in Washington, that the next president, if they're a Democrat, is not going to be able to, hire from Wall Street for all of the positions that regulate Wall Street. It seems like that's going to be a much more difficult thing to slip through nowadays.
Like Obama basically bringing in all of Clinton's Wall Street executives to,
I think any politician, any Democratic politician who is, interested in self-preservation is going to have to think twice about that, no matter sort of whether that might be their first choice or not. So I think things like that are wonderful, and a testament to how you can change a narrative in a political reality over not too long a period of time. As far as the larger issues, Citizens United, etc., it's going to take a lot of organizing. It's going to hopefully take Supreme Court changes, but I'm hopeful.
Great.
Gotta be.